Alright, hey guys, so this video is to walk you through the cube model assignment. So this is the cube model right here, so we're going to be modeling this in OnShape. So there are two documents that you want to have open while you're working on this. The first is this actual model right here, so you can see the dimensions and the sizes of everything and what everything's going to look like, as well as the intro to modeling questions. So these questions are also part of the assignment, so you have to kind of do both. So the intro to modeling questions, you're just going to submit in Canvas. And then the cube model, you're just going to share it with me. So let's go ahead and fire this up. So you guys will have to first sign into OnShape. So that's where this is going to be modeled. So we'll just go ahead and get in here. And I'm putting mine into a folder. You guys don't need to worry about that. So our first question that we have is a project file in OnShape is called what? And the answer is right here. So what you guys are going to do is create a new document. So that's the first answer right there, is document. Okay, so a document is an entire project file. So this is our cube. So what I want you guys to call it is your first and last name and cube. So we'll create document. So that's the answer number one, document. So while that's creating, let's look at number two. An individual part in OnShape is called a what? So let's come back here. And if we look down at the bottom here, we can see that this is our part studio. So that's the answer to number two, right? So each part that we create is a part studio, and a document might be made up of tens, hundreds, or even maybe thousands of part studios. So for example, if we're modeling a car engine, right, we have the head gasket and the cylinder, and we had the the valve cover, and we have all the valves, all the screws, everything that's in there. So there might be lots and lots of different parts. So each one of those parts would be a part studio. The overall engine project would be the document. Now I think that Part Studio 1 is a terrible name, so we'll right click on this and we'll rename this Cube. So you can rename anything by just right clicking on it, and that'll be super useful. And let's get rid of this assembly. We're not using this in the assignment, so we don't want to have unnecessary complexity. So we'll right click and delete. Okay, so there we go. So that's number two, is called a part studio. Number three, before creating a 3D model, what must you create? All right, so let's look at our model here. So we can see that this is a cube, right? So it's a 2x2 cube, so I can see my dimensions. So it's 2 inches by 2 inches by 2 inches. Okay, so before we can actually create any 3D geometry, we need to create a sketch. So every 3D model in CAD starts as a sketch. So that's the answer to number three, sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and click on sketch, and we can choose on any of these planes, which I believe is our next question, and it is. So what are the three planes that you can sketch on? So the three planes are front, right, and top. Okay, and those are our three planes. Now we don't really have to worry about which one to choose now, so we can choose really any of them, but we don't really have to worry about what. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the front plane. Yeah, I would recommend you do as well, just for consistency. And because I like to sketch with the view being normal, that's completely perpendicular to what we're looking at, I'm going to go ahead and click front on the view cube here. Now you can zoom in and out with your mouse, and kind of wherever the mouse is, that's where it's going to zoom in and out too, so you just scroll with your mouse wheel. Right, so there we are. So we need to create a sketch, and that leads us to the next question, which is what are four of the main sketching tool groups? So up here at the top we have all of our sketching tool groups. So it starts with the line tool right here on the left, and then we have the rectangle, circle, arc, polygon, spline, point, and text. So those are our main sketching ones. Some of this other stuff we can use, but that's not really our sketching tools. So all of these will kind of create our different shapes. So a line creates a line, rectangles create rectangles, circles, right, create circles, arc will create an arc, polygons create, well, surprise, a polygon. You can change the number of shapes by clicking your mouse. A spline creates this kind of curvy line, and a point just creates one little dot. So I'll Control Z. Control Z is undo. So we'll get rid of all that stuff because the one that I actually want, since this is a cube, is a square. So that's going to be under rectangle. And the one that I'm going to use is the center point rectangle. So you click on a little drop down here, get your center point rectangle. Right, which leads us to our next one, which is when sketching it is advisable to use what? And the answer to that is the origin. So this center point right here is the origin. That's O-R-I-G-I-N. And we want to use that because it's going to keep our model kind of organized and centered. And that'll not make a huge difference right now, but in the future that will. So I'm going to do what's called a pan down. So with your mouse, if you click on the mouse scroll wheel, it lets you drag this as a pan. So if you just scroll in and out, that's a zoom. But if you actually click down on your mouse scroll wheel, you can drag it around, and that's called a pan. All right, so with my center point rectangle, what I'm going to do is just click once and let go. Okay, don't drag it. It's easier if you just click and let go. Then I'll kind of move my mouse out, and right about there is good. We don't need to worry about exact sides. Now we're going to click one time. Don't click and drag. Don't double click. Just click one time. Okay, and what we see is our rectangle fills in dark gray, and we're kind of have the sizes. Now I'm going to go ahead and type in exact dimensions because precision matters. This needs to be 2 inches by 2 inches by 2 inches. If it's a little off, I will take off points. Okay, so what I can see here is I have that white box. We're not going to click on it. Okay, so we just clicked once to drag out a rectangle, and then we took our hand off the mouse. But what I'm going to do is type 2, hit enter. You can see that it applied that dimension and it moved over to the other side. So I'll hit 2 again, or type 2, and press enter. And now we have a 2 by 2 inch cube. Now, if we messed it up, we can fix that. Let me see. So our next one is, what do we have to click to complete our sketch? We'll get to that later. All right, so what I can do, if you messed up the dimension, that's okay. Nothing is ever permanent. But what we need to do is change that. Now, if we look, our rectangle tool is selected, so I need to deselect that. So we're going to hit escape on the very top left of your keyboard, and you can see that that deselects the tool. So it's selected, hit escape, deselected. Now, if you messed up your dimension, all you have to do is just double click right on the number, and it'll let you retype it. So, for example, I could change this to, if I accidentally made this 3, I could go back and make it 2. So we need 2 by 2. So you can change those just by double clicking on the number. You can also drag these around, but I don't really need to. I like to have them just kind of outside of the shape like that. So that leads us to the next question. What do we have to click on to complete your sketch? And that is the green check mark. So green check mark right there. That is the answer to number 7. All right, so we got our 2 by 2 cube. That leads us to our next one. What tool allows you to pull a flat face into 3D? And that is extrude. Okay, extrude is up here, so that is the answer to the next question. So number 8 is extrude. Okay, and it is that right there. All right, so what's our next one? We're 2 different ways that you can change the view. All right, so I'm looking at this. I'm going to go ahead and extrude and click on my face right there, but I can't really see it pulling out, right? Because I'm staring right at it. It's staring normal to it. So I need to kind of look down at the side. So there are 2 ways to do this. The first is I can right click on my mouse button. So right click on the mouse and just drag it around while I'm holding down the right click. And that does what's called orbit. So that's the first way. So the question was, what are 2 different ways you can change the view? First is just using the mouse. Okay, so we could right click and drag. We can zoom in and out with our mouse scroll wheel. We could click our scroll wheel and move around like that. All work just fine. Okay. The second way is I can use the view cube up here. So that's number 2. This is called the view cube. So I could use this to move around as well. Okay. So we have our part, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of come to a side view like that. Okay, so I can kind of see it. And if we look at our model, this is 2 inches by 2 inches by 2 inches. So I could drag this up, but that's not very precise. So I'm just going to type in 2. And there are a couple more things I want you to check. Make sure that it says solid. If you do surface, it's just going to make kind of a empty box. We don't want that. We want a solid box. So make sure this says solid, and make sure it says new. There are other things we can change. Symmetric would make it kind of grow from the middle out. We don't want that. We can also do draft, which will kind of, bevel the edges or kind of make it go at an angle. We don't want either of those. So what we want is a solid, new, blind, and 2 inches, right? Like that. Perfect. All right, so now we have our cube, which leads us to the next one, number 10. What is the rule about where you can put a sketch? So we're getting closer here. So we have our cube, but on one side we have a square pop out, another side we have a circle pop out, and in the middle we have a kind of hole drilled through it. So the next question is, what is the rule with where you can put a sketch? So what we need to do, because every 3D part or every 3D shape starts as a sketch, we need to sketch on these sides. So I'm going to go ahead and get my sketch tool again, and we're going to sketch on this side. And the rule about where you can put a sketch is it has to be on a flat face. So you cannot sketch on a curve or on a point or like on an edge. It has to be on a flat face. So I'll go ahead and just click there on the flat face, and we'll go ahead and make it so it's normal. And what we need to do now is we need to find the midpoint. So this circle is centered right in the middle of the cube. So I need to find that midpoint, and here's how we're going to do it. I'm just going to get my line tool, and if I hover over the side, eventually this little point will pop up where we see a square, and then this little icon pops up. That means that we are at the midpoint. Okay, that's telling us that's the midpoint. It's an important point. So I'm going to go and click there. Now, if you can see, as I'm dragging out the line, it kind of locks onto that horizontal. That's what we want. We don't want to accidentally have it go off at an angle. So drag it out at the horizontal, and we're going to find the midpoint of the other side. Go ahead and click. We'll hit escape, so that tool's not selected anymore. I'll get my circle, and we're going to do the same thing. So if we hover over here, we find the midpoint. I can click and drag out my circle. And because we have that white box, I can type in 1, and there's our 1-inch circle. That leads us to our last question, which is, what are 2 different ways to get rid of unwanted lines? So now we have these lines here that I don't want, right? I just want the circle. I don't want this line cutting in half. So there are 2 ways. Here they are. First thing I need to do, though, is hit escape, so my circle tool is no longer selected. So the first way I can get rid of a line is by selecting it, just clicking on it, and hit delete or backspace on the keyboard. That'll get rid of it. So that's way number 1. Just click on it and delete. I'll Control Z to get it back. The second way we can get rid of that is with our trim tool. So that's number 2, right? Trim tool is little scissors right here. You click on that, and then I can just click, click. All right, so my line's gone. I can finish my sketch. Excuse me. Now we'll go ahead and extrude this. So we just clicked on the circle. So again, we need solid. Now this time we're going to do add, right? Because we're adding to this shape. So solid, add, and let's make it 0.25. And I got that dimension from right here where it's popped out, 0.25. Okay, so 0.25 right there. All right, perfect. So we got that. Now we're going to do the same thing on this side for the square pop out. So we'll go here. I'll go ahead and get normal to it. Let's find that midpoint. Doing the same thing I did with the circle. Get my square. Okay, I selected the midpoint there again. Come out, click. We'll do 1 inch by 1 inch. I'm just going to hit escape and get rid of that line. And there we go. Okay, so we got our square. So now we have to just extrude that 0.25 inches. And good. Oops. That doesn't look right. 1 inch. Nope, it didn't particularly detect it. There we go. 0.25. Perfect. All right. So the last thing we have is there's this hole, and we can see that it's drilled the entire way through. So if you look at the hidden lines here show us that this hole goes all the way through. All right. So it's perfectly centered. So we can start just like we did both of these. So I'm going to sketch on up here on the front. Now this one, I have the origin right in the center, so I could draw my midpoint lines, but I don't have to. So I can just choose the midpoint right there, or my origin. And that's one of the reasons that we pick the origin. It gives us a centered reference. Okay? And there's our centered circle right there. Now this one we're going to extrude